So there we go. So now we're officially, and what I will do is I want to share.
Let me mute my notifications.
Okay, so now we've got that sharing.
Okay.
Okay, so now we've got us on the side, and see, I just wish it was they were larger. But anyway, um, oh,
You're
okay,
gonna get me in trouble.
why? Uh, why? For yeah, well, that's the thing. If there is anything that you don't want to be associated with, you can say, I'll cut it out. Anyway,
Okay.
this is just the first screen, and what this is just Fireside Chat is sponsored by HTMLZ, which and there's the URL for it, and there's a code that you can get 20% off. So moving swiftly on. Okay, so here is the yeah, the various people. And
Good
oh,
company.
the first question I have actually, which I forgot to ask Crystal Preston Watson, is if which seat would you like to sit in? The cardboard seat or the plushy seat?
Oh, is there actually fire?
Well, yeah, well, I mean, it doesn't really. I mean, You're not going to get physically burnt by sitting in the seat. Put it that way.
Okay. I think I want the plushy seat then.
Yeah, it's the obvious choice, isn't it?
It
So
looks like it should have unicorns.
yeah, well, yeah, it could well do. I might add that. It does have, I don't know if you noticed, but it's got the p- the hands of
Oh
power
yeah.
of their David's arms. Don't swallow. Um, don't ask me why. So first thing is that can you name these people on the screen?
Oh boy. I'm
Top
bad
left,
at names. So,
top left is. I mean, I could just say you know it's not a competition or anything. You don't win
okay.
anything.
I,
But
I mean, I know
so
Glenda. I know me. I know Matt.
yeah,
I know that David McDonald?
yes,
That Carl.
yes, Groves.
I've met the person with the green shirt, but I don't remember their name.
That's her name's Sam Snedden.
Okay.
She was
Yes.
the first tea pack I went to in 2007, which was Mandaloo, or 2008, Mandaloo. She was
I
there
met
and
her.
she was about 12 or something. It was really odd. She's been involved,
16. Yeah.
yeah,
I do remember her from there. Yeah, she looks really
yeah,
different.
been involved in web standards, and she's a luminary of the What WG, and she still works. She works for Apple now, as far as I know.
Oh,
And then Natalie Patrice Tucker.
okay.
Bottom line,
Is that Adrian?
it is Adrian.
And
It's
is that
like,
and that's Charles next to him.
yeah, Charles. I thought I'd drop just. I just wanted to mix it up. And next to him is a fellow called Dax Castro,
Okay,
who,
yeah.
yeah, you
The
probably heard of
PDF
him.
guy, right?
Yeah, PDF guy. And next to him,
Is that Crystal?
that's Crystal Preston Watson.
And
And lastly but not leastly,
James Nerthen.
James Nerthen, yes. And so up the top, we've got the Swallow. He's very proud because he's got some sort of he runs,
Okay.
and so well he tries to run, but anyway, you got a participation medal. Next to that is it's the same picture as the other day that I didn't change it. That is Hayden Pickering, but it's a drawing of. I don't know where it came from, and it reminds me of Frank Zappa, and I
Yeah,
love Frank Zappa.
kinda.
Next to that is Patrick
Oh,
Larker.
okay.
That's on his wedding day.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a bit squashed up because
It's
I
a bit
sort of,
squashed.
yeah, but he's actually, yeah. Oh, ah, Oh God, it just why? Yeah. See, this is what happens. I just keep doing this thing whereby it just keeps disappearing. Um, okay, so I'm going to try again. All right. So we've got all these people. Choose any one of them that you want, and it will reveal a topic.
Let's go with my old friend Charles.
Can't hear you now.
What's that?
You sound's gone.
Oh,
I'll turn up volume. Maybe it's
hello.
me. Oh, there we go.
Is it you? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. See, that's
Okay.
what I mean. It's just the yeah.
Should we
Uh
try that again? It's gonna
yeah,
be hard to edit.
yeah, well, yeah, well, yeah. Who which person would you like to choose?
Let's go with my old friend Charles.
Charles. Okay, hobby. What hobbies do you have? Do you have any hobbies?
Oh wow. I have been trying to get back to doing art.
Right.
Um, been sketching, doing a bit of watercolor. Um, I used to do a lot of art when I was young, and then,
Oh, so
jobs
you
and
mean
kids
as
and
in
mortgages and all that,
drawing and stuff?
drawing and stuff. Yeah.
Do you hang pictures in your or the drawings in your abode, or do you have do you know make them public in any way?
I don't make them public in any way. I might at some point. I just moved, so before I moved, I was hanging them in my abode, and I haven't gotten anything put up yet. But that is the intention. Is
Cool.
to yeah, have more things on the wall that I actually made instead of bought.
I have some, yeah, I mean, I take lots of photographs, and especially when I'm in Spain, I go to Spain fairly regularly because my wife's Spanish and I don't speak the language that well, but I do really enjoy this just walking around and taking pictures of mainly architecture. But I turned some of those into sort of canvas frames, and I've got them up on the wall. So yeah, I mean, it's nice to have things that you have a personal association with, for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm thinking about signing up for there's a sketching, an urban sketching class in January that I'm thinking about signing up for. So doing rough sketches and watercolors of buildings in Amsterdam, which sounds really fun.
Yeah, well, there's lots of interesting. I like Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I like Holland or the Netherlands, I should say now in general. I went to The Hague recently as part to for a WCAG EM face to face with Hiddy DeVries, which I think that
Hmm.
you talked to,
Yeah.
and yeah, it was an interesting place, and I just like the vibe.
Yeah.
So that's where you're well, you're not living in The Hague, but you are living in Amsterdam.
In Amsterdam. Yeah. Just moved a little over a month ago.
And how's that working out so far?
So far, it's working really well. I'm mostly moved in. Don't have any art on the walls, but I am mostly moved in. I
Yeah.
found my spatulas and all of that sort of thing. My stuff that was shipped by sea from the US arrived last week, so
Right.
I'm still kind of surrounded by boxes, but it's nice to have like more than a suitcase worth of stuff. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's working great. I've I've gotten to the point where moving is mostly done, and I'm now focusing on getting my business up and going and finding clients and grant funding for standards work and all of that kind of thing.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a big task.
it is.
So have you moved on your own or with family?
My 21-year-old is with me, and we're starting this business together. So
21-year-old. Is that
yes,
good?
that is that baby you met.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I mean, I was just thinking back as, how long I've known you, and did you were you at the Birmingham ARIA work meetup? I think you might. I'm pretty. I'm talking 2009, sometime like that. I know Rich was there, but we were doing a lot
You
of
know?
the aria,
Yeah.
at the time, um, the aria specification of how aria can be used, or what implicit semantics were within HTML elements was in the HTML spec itself.
I don't think I was at that one. I think that was one of the years where my corporate role was internally facing. Um,
Well,
but
you didn't miss a lot. I mean, well, I mean, I can hardly remember. I know that Charles was there. I know that Rich Swertweger, I always have problems saying his name,
yeah.
was there. All I remember, because at the time I was smoking and I went outside with Charles, went outside the venue for a cigarette. And then there was like these people, like street urchins, sort of homeless people that just descended upon us as soon as we appeared. They literally ran over to us to beg. It was
No,
interesting. So
I don't think I was there.
you missed out on that. Um, so you moved to Amsterdam. You're setting up a business with your daughter. That's an interesting point. What is the business?
So we're doing accessibility consulting, obviously, because that's what I do. And there's kind of two areas that I think we have sort of stand out. One is that I have all this experience with big companies and with setting up sustainable programs and,
Yep.
shifting left and making it so that uh, not only are we going to find your bugs and help you fix them, but we're going to help you set up the systems and do all the training and integrate it into your processes and so that you don't get those bugs, so you don't keep getting them, and so that when you do, you find them early.
So when you say you've got the experience, give us a bit of a potted history of your work in accessibility and standards, etc.
Gonna show my age here. Um, so
Well, you're not as old as me, so you're doing okay.
um, I was a dev lead on the MSN homepage right at the turn of the century,
Yeah,
and someone from Microsoft's internal accessibility group showed up in my office with a door with WCAG 1 on paper and asked me to implement it.
yeah,
And MSN even then was like we had done all these things. It wasn't called Ajax then, but we were doing
yeah,
server round trips and using the DOM to pull things out of iframes and update and cookies
yeah,
and style sheets and all sorts of good fun, right? And WCAG 1, if you remember, said don't use JavaScript.
yeah.
And
Was that one of those until assistive technology kept up or not? I can't remember.
no, it wasn't even an Intel user agents. I think the CSS one was because it also said, everything has to work without CSS. But it was basically that you have to have a no script and your no script has to have the same functionality as your script because there were people using links and stuff
Yeah,
still then. Uh,
links as in LYNX links.
LYNX, which was a text-based.
Yeah, I think Patrick Larker, he still uses fires up links. Well, he always mentions it when
Yeah.
we're arguing about things. Um,
And
Ironically, I must admit, but he still mentions it.
for a static text-based, maybe an image tag here and there kind of a web, it's a perfectly fine tool. I mean, I also remember using Gopher in the library in college, and it
Now
wasn't that
you are
different.
showing your age, yeah.
Yeah.
So, so you sort of like I associate you with Matt May and Wendy Chisholm. You were all friends together and
We're all friends together. Yeah.
involved
So,
at the same time.
so they this person from Microsoft's accessibility group handed me WCAG 1 on paper and asked me to implement it. And I looked at it and said, "This says don't use JavaScript, don't use CSS. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Can I fix it?" And I didn't expect that to take 8 years, but it did. And suddenly, by the end of that 8 years, people had decided I was an expert. Um, during that 8 years, like I left that job at MSN, I went to a startup for a while. I came back as a program manager in on Visio, did a lot of thinking about graphics accessibility and sort of what it means to separate content from presentation in diagrams and drawings. I have patents about that. Uh,
Ooh.
ooh, it's very fancy. Um,
Do they
um,
generate any money for you, though? That's the question.
uh, Microsoft gives patent bonuses, not huge amount, but
Yeah.
you get a nice little bonus when you get a patent
Oh,
and a little statue, um,
yeah. Okay.
um, which
Did
I
you
cared a
bring
lot
those
about at
with
the
you
time.
to Europe? Did you carry the statues with you?
I actually did ship a box of old office stuff because I just couldn't get rid of it.
Oh,
Um,
you'll have to put them on public display at some point so we can see.
they're in a closet right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also have a shrink wrapped IE2 or is it IE3? A shrink wrapped IE3 box
Uh,
software.
uh,
Um,
I got
and
yeah, I got the MVP thing, and I for a couple of years the what is it, the most valued,
right, most valuable partner, I think.
yeah, something, or most valuable person, yeah, or something. It's just a load of rubbish, really. I mean, I but here, still got it here, but I haven't got uh, see
Yeah,
it's
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I
but
recognize that font.
yeah, but it hasn't, like, you have these sort of little like glass like coins or something you put on it for each year. I've lost, well, I had it for 2 years. I lost one, but not
Yeah,
that. Yeah, I think it's like most things. It's worth less than it the trouble it is to maintain it.
yeah.
So,
Like I
but
said, my things are all in a box. But and
so did
so
you? Yeah, sorry, go on.
so like after that, you know, I left MSN. I went to a startup for a while. I came back as a program manager working on graphics. I worked on Smart Art, which is part of it's in all the Office apps now, but it started out in PowerPoint, which does automatic diagramming. It's not AI. It's it's it, it's extensible with an XML-based format. Not that anybody does
Ooh,
that anymore,
yeah,
but that was the new hotness at the time. Um, and and then I worked on a bunch of other Microsoft products, but I always kind of had accessibility as a side job. And then sometime, I'm trying to remember exactly when, like 2008 or so, I went full time to run accessibility for Windows Live. And then I went to the central accessibility team that was at the time called Trustworthy Computing under Rob Sinclair, who you probably know.
yeah.
Um, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've met him and know where is Rob Sinclair? Is he? He's somewhere else. Like,
He was at Atlassian. I
yeah,
haven't checked
yeah,
in a while. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, because I knew somebody from TPG that or a number of people. I mean, what's his name? Gerard Cohen. I don't know if you know him,
Mhm.
but he was at Wells Fargo for many years. He's front end developer, accessibility related, but he moved to Atlassian. I say Atlassian, but yeah, but that doesn't really matter. But yeah, I mean, people tend to move around, don't they?
They really do. Yeah.
Well,
Um,
mostly.
I was at Microsoft for a very long time, but and then I left in 2016 and I went,
Was your departure from Microsoft, was that a uh was it acrimonious or was it fine?
it was fine. It was fine. It was time.
Yeah.
Um, and I went to Starbucks for a while where I set up a
I
whole
remember you being at
yeah,
Starbucks. Yeah.
I set up a whole accessibility program for their technology department. So Starbucks is a huge company, but
Yeah.
they're the team that builds their website and their apps sits in an IT organization, and it was a couple hundred people. But their apps have such broad reach that we were working on the mobile order and pay app. So it had, not only did it have I don't remember the numbers, but bazillions of users. It also had bazillions of dollars flowing through it. Um,
Right.
and we were working really hard to make that app as accessible as it could be so that so it would work for everybody. Starbucks client base is everybody, right? Like they try to be super broad based and appeal to everybody. Um, and I think we did a pretty good job. Like
I'm sure you did.
yeah,
I
it
mean,
was a cool app.
it's never one of the things I was talked to Crystal Preston Watson about was burnout and how, especially when you're in organizations in a smallish team or you're the only person in the accessibility person in the room, um, that you expect to know everything. And I've been lucky enough never to be in a situation where I'm expected to know everything because I obviously don't. And I like to stay in my lane, as far as when people say subject matter expert as, as in relation to accessibility, there's just it's such a broad
Yeah,
technical subject. You can't, I never claimed to be. Luckily enough, as I said, when people say, "Are you an expert?" I say, "No, I'm not an expert, but I know somebody who is." I
yeah,
know quite a few people. I mean, there's people. So I always ask, the person or the people that I know, well, I think have some understanding of that particular area to provide the information because the last thing you want, like, oh, well, the last thing I would want to do is to provide advice that's incorrect or,
yeah.
so yeah,
And a lot of what I've tried to do at all the places I've worked is to like train everybody on the team, right? Like, you know, before I got so deeply into accessibility, I have a lot of experience just shipping software, right?
yeah,
And building websites and high volume websites and keeping them alive and keeping them updated and, not getting server 500 errors that show up in newspapers and all sorts of fun things like that, right? The 90s were awesome. But but being able to like understand that building anything is a team is a team thing, and you've got developers, but you've also got designers and product managers, and sometimes you have business analysts, and you have all these different roles that all have and content authors, and they all have a role to play, and just doing some very broad-based training so that what I really hate about being the one accessibility person is that you spend 80% of your day answering the same 10 questions over and over again. And that is not fun. And so getting it so that people can generally answer those 10 questions themselves, whether that's by looking something up or by going through training so they know the answers, and also so they can integrate it into their work, right? Because like I'm never going to know all the nuances of UI design, right?
exactly, yeah.
It's not my thing. And I can kind of sort of use Photoshop, but I can't like do anything good with it. And
Well, yeah.
yeah, I can kind of sort of use Figma too. Like it's just,
Depends on what you mean by good. I quite like what I do with, well, I had a version of Photoshop that I had when I first started at Vision Australia, and I kept it. It was like version
yeah,
6. And, I could just take the whole XE and then put it onto a new machine.
yeah,
And that finally stopped working when Windows 10 came out, I think.
yeah,
Um, but you know, it was just as useful, uh, 15 years later than it was when I first, because my skills never really increased. But just being able to do basic manipulation, I really dislike a lot of the AI integrations into like graphics products. I've gone back to using Paint, so which has evolved somewhat, but still, I
yeah,
just want to do basic things like turn images around or just
yeah.
remove backgrounds and things like that. Anyway,
My my deeply ingrained set of keyboard shortcuts for like taking screenshots and things with Paint, most of them don't work anymore. And
right,
and backward compatibility is a good thing, but some of these things that were, it was still considered backward compatibility in 2002, right? Like
Yeah.
it like until pretty recently, all the WordPerfect keyboard shortcuts worked in Word. I don't think they do
Really?
anymore, but they worked forever. Um,
Um, wow.
Perfect still
Yeah.
exists.
Well, I mean, it's good that they keep, you know,
Yeah,
yeah. So the muscle memory still work, but there's some point, I suppose, where you've got to
yeah.
change
And
it
I
up a
think
little bit.
Microsoft is less dedicated to backward compatibility than they once were. But I don't work there anymore, so I don't have any inside info.
Well, yeah, that's Internet Explorer. I mean, what that was an unfortunate demise.
Yeah,
Did you work on the Edge?
I did work on Edge. That was the last role I had at Microsoft was on
And
the
what
Edge
were
web
you doing
platform.
then?
I was doing accessibility PM for Edge web platform. That was the pre-Chromium Edge web
Yeah.
platform.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
so that time when we got 100% on your test, that was me and my team.
Well, I knew that. Yeah, I can remember that you were involved with that somehow, and but then I was dealing with Melanie some. No, not Melanie Sumner. Melanie something.
Yeah.
And
Melanie took over when I left.
yeah, and Dave Story. Do you?
Yeah. Yeah, I haven't
Yeah,
talked to him in a
I
long
mean,
time.
I haven't. He's disappeared off the face of the universe. I haven't seen anything from him for ages.
Yeah, I don't know.
Just
I
like,
think he's still in Seattle, but I'm not sure.
yeah. I mean, I was thinking back that we first started to collaborate on the what became the HTML accessibility API specification. That was like 2010, 2011.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
And yeah, I can't remember why you stopped being involved. I think that you got taken out of, your focus was changed at Microsoft. But what
Yes.
I was thinking about that document, that specification, was that predated any of the other AANs. That was the model, and now I've just seen. Well, you're soon to be working on the
SVG.
SVG AAN,
Yeah.
which has been moved for ages. But yeah, there's a whole thing. I I remember at CSUN and which about 2010, and I was touting the idea of having this because having the HMLA purely because that there was no central, like there was no documentation around how shit worked. How the accessibility APIs worked and how they represented things, whether there was any interoperability. And I remember I was talking to what was his name? Aaron Leventhal
Yeah.
at the time, Leventhal at the time. And he was like, yeah, he told him to fuck off, basically. Well, he didn't say that, but there wasn't a huge amount of interest coming from him.
Yeah. Because he'd been doing the ARIA one.
Yeah.
The HTML group was pretty hard to work with in that era, and I think that may have been some of it.
Well, I
Uh,
got yeah, I thought a lovely bunch. It's funny you should say that because now I'm on I get pinged when there's what WG, HTML related issues,
yeah.
accessory related issues, and I'm one of the people that gets pinged. There's quite a few, but now I sound like the voice of reason, sort of like there's these things that come up, and then myself and others, such as Leonie and Pat, we sort of say, well, yeah, you've got to think about it differently or whatever, and we end up usually the making the point that no change needs to be made, or people just don't understand. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about how accessibility APIs work, how browsers, produce them, how assistive technology, mainly screen readers, uh, consume that information. So it's a lot. I've been thinking back to, 10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, even the amount of people involved in the accessory community and the web standards community that have an interest or that have expertise in accessibility related stuff was minuscule compared to today, which is
Yeah.
really good. I mean, I'm glad there's lots of people, but there's also lots of people that want to be involved that have eagerness, but don't have the full perspective. So it can involve education. It's still
And there's a lot more resources and infrastructure for beginners than there used to
yeah
be.
yeah
Uh,
there is, but I think it's a lot more complicated. Well, it
I mean, the
appeals.
whole web is more complicated than it
Yeah,
used to
yeah.
be, right? It's not like you're going to build a website in Notepad anymore. So,
No, I
which I
started
did
with
for money
Dream
at
and
Microsoft, at one
yeah,
time.
right. Um, so yeah, so that
Well,
the
and
work of
the thing with the AAMs is that there's this big disconnect because web people don't understand operating systems, and operating system people don't understand the web,
yeah
right? And for accessibility to work, it's the web getting translated into an operating system API, and
yeah
then operating system rules taking over, and it's just really different, and it's different on every platform, and it's super complicated, and it's hard. I think it's just hard for a lot of people who love the web and have, think in web ways.
mm,
Operating systems are really alien. And the same was true. I think Microsoft is better about this than they used to be. I don't know. Google's certainly better about this than they used to be. But that, people who spent 20 or 30 years building Windows,
yeah
the browser's just an app, right? And it should work the same as all the other apps.
but no.
But no, right? And it's just like it's really hard to bridge that paradigm. See, I got to say paradigm.
Nice. Well, yeah, they tick that one off your bucket list. So I've always forget. I mean, the Microsoft always push UIA, and I get it, but I just don't understand the full advantages of user. What was it? User
User
interface
interface automation.
automation or
Yeah.
something versus iAccessible 2, for example.
So putting on a hat from 3 jobs ago.
Yeah,
Um,
that's what I like.
uh,
Thank you
yeah.
back.
You asked me what I was doing. I also, after Starbucks, I worked at Google for 5 years, 4 years,
Yeah,
on Chrome. But uh, basically, the idea behind UIA was that you wouldn't be as tied to roles. So, like roles, as they were defined in MSAA and as they're defined in ARIA, were designed for Windows 98, right?
right.
And there was only so many widgets and you couldn't really customize them very much, and um, they were mapped onto the set of roles and different properties. And if you think about, if you set the Wayback Machine and think about what I don't know, Word or something looked like in 1998,
Yeah,
everything that you needed for that was available in MSAA. But when uh, in the early 2000s, when Microsoft started changing their UI and doing a lot of things to make a lot of stuff was more customizable, even in Windows and also on the web, like people were, building brand new kinds of UI out of
yeah,
tables and divs and
yeah.
click handlers and all that good, right? Um, and there wasn't anything in MSAA to express a lot of that stuff. And so the idea behind UIA was that instead of having just like this is a button and it has these states and these actions. It it had ways to combine behaviors, which are called patterns in UIA. Um, the iOS accessibility API has something really similar, traits, where you
Yeah,
can, instead of having, well, you can have a roll of button, you can have a thing that has clickability and a pressed state and other things like that. And it doesn't have to be a button. or it doesn't have to be a menu. You can combine all the behaviors that you want to express any kind of UI. So that's what UIA was about. It was also tied in with all the managed .NET Vista, or sorry, not Vista, Longhorn stuff, right?
Yeah. I mean, what you said you worked at Google and on Chrome. So what is what I don't know about the current state, but what is the state of implementation of UIA in browsers other than Edge?
I mean, okay, so I have not looked at the code, but this is what I was told that Microsoft to get Edgeium, Chrome-based Edge, to work with UIA, Microsoft implemented it all, but it's not turned on in Chrome.
Right.
And I believe you can build with a flag and turn it on. But
So why is it not enabled in Chrome? Um,
I'm
I
trying to
mean,
think of what I'm actually allowed to say about this.
yeah, that's fine. I don't want to put you on the spot. I'm just interested because, I heard,
Compatibility mostly, like,
yeah,
um,
but
it's a
I mean,
big change, right? Switching what
yeah,
accessibility API you're using
yeah,
is a huge change, and the potential to break the web is huge, and the testing cost is huge, and like I I think that's the gist of it, but it wasn't really like a project that was being seriously considered when I was there.
gotcha. It's yeah. I mean, because like a screen reader like Narrator, which is the built-in screen reader from
Yeah.
Microsoft, um, from Windows, that only uses UI as far as I know. Is that correct?
That is correct, but there is a translation layer in Windows.
Right.
So Narrator can work with MSAA based apps,
Yeah.
but not iAccessible2 based apps. At least that may have changed, but at one point that was true. So there's
That's a bit
a
of a downer.
well, because iAccessible2 isn't Microsoft's API, right? Like it's
No, it's the Linux Foundation, isn't it? It's a
yeah, I don't know. I think
yeah.
it first showed up in Netscape. I can't remember. Um,
But
but
it is well supported across most of the
absolutely, yeah.
browsers or
Um,
common browsers, Chrome, Firefox, etc.
so that and this is one of those places where the web way of thinking about things and the operating system way of thinking about things are really different. When UIA was created, it was created for Windows apps, right? And so there's a translation layer that allows old Windows apps to work with
Yeah,
UIA-based AT. Um, and it wasn't really necessarily thinking about the web. It was thinking, then it makes perfect sense.
but then you got things, yeah, then you got things like Electron apps, which are
Yeah.
built on browser engines but are apps
Yeah.
themselves. So, yeah, I mean, it's just mad. I mean, there's always something new and exciting
Yeah.
and interesting and buggy to
Yeah.
work on. So, going back to your current, so you're in Amps. Do you plan to stay in Europe for an extended period?
Um, I'm on a 2-year visa, which I
Yeah,
will probably renew,
yeah,
but things are a little fluid at the moment.
yeah.
So, but I'll be here for at least 2 years.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Um, well, hopefully we can catch up when
Yeah,
next year. TPAC is in Dublin,
it is. And there's
so
something in Dublin in February too, but I'm going to go to. I can't remember what it was,
obviously,
but some little conference.
yeah. There's a really good conference called State of the Browser. Um, that it's a 1 day thing that happens in London. If you get a chance to go to that, I think it's in February this year, but I presented it one of my rare times of presenting. Um, and it's just got lots of interesting. Like last year, it had the guy from the Ladybird browser,
Hmm.
the engine, and that was interesting because I learned more about that. And there was a guy that I think he was a German guy or Austrian guy or maybe a Dutch guy. I don't know, but Oliver Limburg, I think his name was, and he did. Um, he's all about fonts, and that was I really enjoyed his.
Cool.
his presentation. So anyway, state the browser. I'm just giving a shout out for that. I've got my ticket already. Tetralogical, we sponsor state the browser. So um,
Okay.
it's yeah, it's
Yeah,
a
send me some info. I'll look at it.
yeah, it's and the location, the venue is the I can't remember the name of it now. It's somewhere in it's somewhere in London, but the architecture of the building is really like it's sort of almost organic, but brutalist organic. It's quite interesting.
I haven't been to London in like 20 years, so I don't know, but that sounds cool.
Yeah, no, it is. So I'm looking forward to that. Always like to look, forward to things. So where like you living in a flat or a house?
In a flat, and yeah, right in the center, and
Oh, cool.
yeah, and I have a co-working space that I don't go to very often, and
Yeah,
a desk in a corner, and that's where I am right now. That's my real background behind me.
nice.
Yeah,
Yeah, if I showed you my real background, you would yeah.
you got it lined up perfectly though, because pillows keep blinking in and out on the cushy chair.
Yeah, that's so I've got some pillows in the back here. Yeah, it's my comfy zone, office stroke comfy zone. Um, okay, so I, I'm not going to bother to go back to the board because we're just chatting about stuff. Um, so were you actually involved in WCAG one?
No, I came in right at the beginning of WCAG 2. So that's where I met Wendy, right? Because Wendy
Right.
worked on WCAG 1 and Wendy worked with Greg Vanderheiden at the Trace Center, I
Yeah.
think when she was in grad school, and was the editor of WCAG 1. And then I asked to, can I fix this when I was at Microsoft? And I went to a WCAG meeting at CSUN in 2000 and where they decided to charter WCAG 2. And so I was there at the very beginning of WCAG 2. And I had a lot of experience trying to implement WCAG 1 on a, big modern site, which was
Yeah.
just not what people were thinking about, right? 'Cause, I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
it went rec in 99, but it was mostly written in like 97. And I know those sound like kind of close together, but the web
Yeah.
changed so much in
Much.
those two
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Definitely. I remember the first day I started at Vision Australia, which was in 2001. My boss at the time, Andrew Arch, it was just before Christmas, I think. But he like you, he provided me with a paper copy of Wakehead One and said, read it. I had very little understanding of accessibility, but yeah, just 4 or 5 years working on as a consultant at Vision Australia really helped. And also the fact that there was lots of people that that had disabilities around at Vision Australia because it's a low vision, and
Yeah.
uh, it was really instructive and helpful for me, to understand and also to understand the WCAG, um, or understand WCAG at the time. So now that you've set up do you have actual business set up like a
I have
or
an actual business. I'm a Dutch corporation.
excellent. Well, you should do you have a website that you yet?
It's not quite up yet. And so it's Scaled Accessibility Consulting is the company,
Yeah.
and scaledA11y.com is the website. It's a coming soon page right now, but I'm real close.
Well, please, when it does actually, you do actually get some content on there, let us know, and
Yeah,
do my best to promote uh, your work.
I'm uh I'm using WordPress and learning all about WordPress accessibility, and I haven't really I've worked with CMSs before, but not like building a site from scratch in a CMS. When I've built sites
Yeah.
from scratch, it's been, writing code from scratch. Um, and so it's interesting, but I decided to go ahead and go with WordPress because it's so popular that it seemed like it would be just a
That's
really
what I
important
used
thing to know how to
OneNote.
do. What's that?
I use that for my blog. I have for years, and before that, at TPG, the TPG blog was WordPress based. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. What one thing that I do know is that I don't use the new editor. You know, the WYSIWYG. I use the old one because it's got some odd name, the new editor, but it's just yeah.
Blocks.
Huh?
Block editor.
Yeah, it's a pile of poo. I just use the, you know, I mean, I don't need to have, lots of intricacies on the site, so which is
Yeah.
helpful.
I
But
think
yeah,
I need to know how all that works because I'm looking for consulting work, right? So,
yeah,
and it's going to be a thing a lot of people are using, and it seems like a lot of things, right? If you know how, you can make it accessible, but it's pretty easy to screw it up.
yeah, definitely. That I've definitely screwed it up more often than not. Um, so mentioned that you had talked to Hidi DeVries. He's he seems to be everywhere these days. Like sort of wherever I look he's doing a conference or a talk or he's at TPAC or whatever.
Yeah.
But he's a really nice guy. So I'm glad that you two managed to get in
Yeah.
contact.
And I actually, now that I'm settled, like reaching out to him again and being like, okay, let's have lunch is
Yeah,
one of the things on my short to-do list.
yeah. I mean, I had a really nice time when I went to The Hague because that's where their offices are.
Mm.
Because he works for the Dutch government, and so I went up some huge skyscraper. But it was just a really nice, and like The Hague has just got a really chill sort of vibe about it. Even though it's like I've always thought The Hague, there's all this sort of politics going on. I didn't see much going on, but I just got a good feeling about the place.
Something
Uh,
I've been really impressed with it here is that government works really well here. Like it's pretty chill, but
yeah,
everything's very organized and it's really well documented what to do, and there aren't too many steps, and everybody, like the people working in the government offices, are nice and helpful, and the lines aren't very long, and it's like
yeah. It's
um
government as government should work. Um, Unfortunately, the states. I mean, the state of of government and in general in the states seems to be on the wane, so to speak.
and interacting with government offices in the US has never been, well, in my lifetime, never been particularly easy, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
What do you, as regards to healthcare, do you get healthcare or do you
yeah, I
have
can
to?
get. So the Dutch system is it's not a fully nationalized system. It's a
Yeah,
regulated insurance system. And I do qualify for that insurance, and it is significantly less expensive than the
yeah.
US. Um,
That's one of the reasons why I don't think I could live in the States because the cost of healthcare and just that model of healthcare just means that to me that you're not um guaranteed to get the help that you need. You
I've
know,
always worked for big companies, and
yeah,
I've always had good insurance. I mean, I had a few years without insurance right after college, but I was young and healthy, and
yeah,
I was lucky, right? Like,
yeah,
but since I was in my late 20s, I've always had good insurance. I always worked for big companies, and going independent and actually like going and looking at those marketplaces, it's like, wow, this is this is hard. It's really
yeah.
complicated. It's really, and
Well,
it got simpler. Like Obamacare sort of simplified some of the choices, but
yeah,
it's still
it's still yeah, it's
still
still a big
and
marketplace, which Um, yeah, I mean, I just find it difficult. Well, I understand it because we live in a capitalist society, and there's plenty of other aspects of life that are involved with the markets. But it's always like both education and healthcare has always seen that it shouldn't be profit motive, motivated by profit. And
Yeah.
I mean, people complain about the NHS, but still, I find, and to an extent, it's the postcode lottery, depending on where you live. But I always have always found the healthcare support to be excellent in the UK and in Australia as well, which had a sort of universal healthcare, but there was some co-pay, but it was all very small. But for example, the as far as prescriptions are concerned, I had to take certain medications on a regular basis, and up until I was 60, that it didn't matter what you were getting, that it was £10, or this approximately £10, a bit less, but now so per prescription. So if I was getting some antibiotics, it'd be £10. But
Right.
once I turn 60, it's free.
Oh,
So
that's nice.
yeah, yeah. I mean, the benefits of getting old. I was
Yeah.
surprised because I went into the chemist and the guy said to me, "Oh, you don't have to pay anymore." I said, "What?"
Cool.
Yeah, yeah. So it's yeah. I mean,
60 doesn't sound as old as it once did.
well, only yeah. Well, I wish I was 60. I'll be 62 in January. But anyway, I mean that doesn't. Yeah, it's just part of life. Getting old is that getting older. But what I don't want to do was end up because I see sort of, especially in the standards work and the W3C, there's some older people that should really just not retire, but just be less, officious in their and active in their wanting to put their finger in their every pie. I don't think it's actually age related. I think there's just some people that just like the sound of their own voice, or just want to have an opinion on everything. And I've never been one of those people, thank God.
Some, I've been around standards a long time, and some of the people I think you're talking about were like that when they were 35 too, or 40, or,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
Well, maybe yeah. I mean, I had my times with HTML and the WhatWG working group and all those
indeed.
things, and that because one of the subjects that I talk about, that I bring up as topic, is burnout. And I think that I did have a bit of a burnout from doing standards work for several years, and then I've sort of got back into it.
Yeah.
And it seems similar. Well, I'm not saying you had a burnout, but you were not involved. Now you're starting to get back involved again. Are you enjoying the?
I am, right? Like I get to pick what I work on now.
Yeah,
And, and when you work for a big company, like there's the thing that the whole company is doing, and you need to be involved in that. And then you've got your own little specialization area,
yeah,
and it's hard to like carve out enough time to do it and do it well. And and there's always, the winds change a lot in big companies. There are reorgs and strategy shifts and yada yada yada. And you have to like refocus what you're doing to survive.
yeah,
I used to call it surfing reorgs, but
yeah,
uh, now I'm independent, and one of the things, of course, that means that I'm. It used to be very easy to get funding. I just had to convince,
yeah,
my boss's boss, right? And
yeah.
now I need to like go out there and beat the bushes and look for actual funding to do that work. Um,
Yeah, that can be time consuming and can also,
yeah,
get you down. But I
but
mean,
it's
I've been, like my life has been, and my work life has been, I've been gifted with the opportunities to, like, I've never worked, like, I've worked for a largish company, but, compared to the likes of Microsoft or whatever, but also that I worked, for a long period for a accessibility, primarily accessibility consultancy.
Yeah.
And so I got to work on stuff, and also I had a lot of latitude, so I was able to just work on stuff that interested me.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
uh,
So
yeah,
I'm trying to find the right balance between like consulting with companies and helping them make their presence accessible and helping them build systems that keep it that way,
yeah,
and doing standards work, which is probably mostly grant funded. Maybe you can get a vendor contract with a tech company every now and then, but it's mostly going to be grant funded.
yeah.
And I want to do some of both of that, and then Finn, my business partner, is early in their career, and so I'm training them to do some more of the
Nice.
testing, and I think
Yeah.
they're probably going to do the PDF remediation certification. Seems like there's a lot of PDF remediation work. So I hope that we'll be able to offer sort of a full spectrum. They're also really interested in accessibility of physical spaces, buildings, and things
Yeah.
like that. And I'm hoping that, as we get a little farther along, we'll be able to offer businesses this sort of full package that includes both digital and physical presence. Um,
Do you
Not there
plan
yet.
on like if you get the more work you get, do you plan on employing or getting other people involved?
If we have enough work, yeah. I haven't probably something I've thought a lot about is like internships and
Yeah,
how we can bring in, and I did a lot of this when I was at in other jobs too. How can you bring in early career engineers who have disabilities? How can you
yeah,
train up people who have a lot of potential but maybe, don't get the interview?
yeah,
Um, and so, thinking like maybe doing some internships or some co-ops, or
yeah.
uh, I suspect that there's government funding for that sort of thing. Haven't really looked into it a whole lot, but yeah, I think growing to, you know, certainly bigger than the two of us. I don't I don't want to be a unicorn or have a hockey stick or blah, blah, just I just want to do work, right? I don't want to.
Yeah.
I've already managed big companies. I don't want to do that anymore. But if we have enough clients, then yeah, I would absolutely want to do, to expand the pool of people who can work in this field, and also obviously to partner with other consultants and other companies that do this kind of work.
Yeah, you should also to, Hitty knows them, but there's a company called Abra, which is they have a Dutch company, and they specialize in mobile
Hmm.
um uh the automated testing or semi-automated testing, but they also do some testing. But there's a guy called Jean Japp, I think his name is. I never know how to pronounce these people's names, but he is head of or he's the chair of the mobile accessibility task force
Okay,
in way. But he's one of the people that work there. Another guy called Paul Wokum, I think his name is.
seen that name, yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, I sort of have a look. Hitty knows them. Ask him because I'm sure it would just be nice for you to hook up, well, not hook up, but sort of to meet them because they're
Yeah,
nice people. They're local. They live in Dutch Lane. One of
yeah.
my what a person that I worked with for many years, Hans Hillen, started on the same day. I don't know if you ever.
I've been in some meetings with him, but I don't know him well.
Yeah, Hans is sort of like he has a deep level of knowledge, but he doesn't have a social presence, and so people don't know him as well. Unlike me, who has a very surface level of knowledge, but has a deeper social presence. But yeah, he's Dutch. Uh, I don't even know why I was thinking. See,
You're
my
just thinking of all the Dutch people you know, right?
yeah, yeah, but no, but Hans lives in New Zealand now anyway. He's still working at TPG. But he and I started on the same day in 2006 at TPG.
Nice.
So, anyway, yeah, sorry, it ends up like I don't mean to bring the topic of conversation around to myself, but it just seems to
Yeah, that's good.
it, it just seems to happen.
Yeah, I'm just
It
trying to
just
think of like,
reminds me of all these things, especially talking to someone such as yourself, who I've known for years on a some level and interacted with in various situations. It just reminds me of all of these things from the
yeah,
past.
yeah,
That's part of what happens when you get old, Cynthia.
it's true.
What has gone before is greater than what will come in the future, hopefully.
I don't know. People in my family live into their 90s, and my dad didn't
Wow.
retire till he was almost 80. So, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I don't plan on retiring until I'm 70, not because I mean, I enjoy doing this stuff anyway.
yeah,
But also I've got a 16-year-old daughter and a 21-year-old daughter, and they both still live at home. Well, the 16-year-old, of course, but the 21-year-old. And so I just need to generate money to feed their habits, their lifestyles.
yeah,
My wife works as well, so we both work full time.
yeah.
So, how are you finding the cost of living over in Amsterdam?
It's It's a more complicated answer than you would expect. So I came from Seattle, which is a very expensive place. Like it's not,
Right.
it's right behind it's not quite up there with like London, New York, San Francisco, but it's not too far behind there.
Yeah.
So compared to that, it seems pretty affordable, but there is a housing crisis and a lot of landlords won't rent to immigrants and it ends up being kind of pricey, but I don't know,
I
I'm still
mean,
getting my feet.
in comparison to Seattle,
It's less than Seattle, but also like, I had a whole house, right? And
yeah,
I bought my house before the interest rates went up and
yeah,
so it's a little hard to do apples to apples. Groceries are definitely cheaper. I don't have to have a car. That's
yeah.
definitely
That's
cheaper. I bought a bike.
yeah. Yeah, I love like just watching, because a lot of the times when I go to Amsterdam or mainly Amsterdam that I've been to, just watching the people on the bikes, just sitting there and some having a coffee, just watching the world go by. It's such a wonderful place for doing that.
It really is, yeah. And I the first few times I tried to ride a bike here, it was like, oh, there's people everywhere, and how does this work? And like not only are there bike lanes everywhere, there's left turn lanes for bikes. Like it's
Yeah,
um,
it's serious. And
and I
yeah,
realized the closest analogy I can come to is that riding a bike here is like driving in Los Angeles. You just
right.
have to be, a protozoa floating with the flow, right?
Yeah, yeah. You just got to get into that stream. I I spent some time in Thailand in the a smaller city in the south of Thailand, and I had a moped there, and yeah, driving around there, it's like you go into a stream and just got to
Yeah.
follow with the flow and just yeah, it's incredible. Uh, okay, so you're still finding your feet um, in Amsterdam. In your work wise, you're starting to get some clients or customers.
Getting there. Yeah.
So things are positive for you, which
Things
is
are positive. Yeah. I just started working on the SVG
yeah,
AAM, and I'm working with Lola on accessibility compat data.
yeah,
And, that's, as you may remember, like testing and automated testing and being able to
yeah,
test browsers and compare them and
yeah,
have, again, that's what the AAMs were about too. It's like
yeah,
writing down what the browser's doing, comparing it. Um, ACD, I think, is kind of the next step in that. And, you know, if anybody remembers Intel user agents in WCAG 1, and then
yeah,
accessibility supported was the WCAG 2 version of that, but it was kind of, vibe based. And so trying to get to a place where it's not, right, where you don't have to
yeah.
be an
There's some
expert on the
interesting,
market.
definitely some interesting discussions around that,
Yeah,
around accessory supported because quite often, I mean, well, quite often, on occasion, I use that as an argument as to why something fails, WCAG or whatever, because even though if it's not accessibly supported, like, if enough um, of the assistive technology people use don't support it, or the majority doesn't support it, then it's not accessibly supported in my.
But how do you know that as a regular web developer? Like there's just,
Well,
you know,
yeah,
you I
yeah,
mean, you go, even among the crowd we hang out with, there's a lot of like discussion and
yeah,
positioning and is it or isn't it? And then, you've got all the different AT and the different operating systems, different language markets, something that's accessibility supported in English might not be accessibility supported in some other
yeah,
language. Um, and, if you don't speak English, then that doesn't really do you any good, right? And it's a really complicated thing. And so I
oh
think
yeah,
that's where
yeah,
having, I mean, just like your HTML5 acid test thing, right?
yeah.
Like just having some data that says like these are the things we expect and this is where it works and doesn't. Also,
That's what I've tried to do with the HTML screen reader support
yeah,
data.
yeah,
It it's not trying to provide. It's just trying to provide like an easy way for people who don't have a lot of time to be able to compare, and to
yeah,
understand
right,
how assistive technology, screen readers in particular, um, sort of interpret and convey the semantics of
yeah,
HTML. It's important for people to understand, but yes, a lot of it, and this ACD stuff that you're doing with Lola that I'm tangentially involved in, I think that will be helpful as well because it
yeah.
provides that, yeah, that those data points that people need to understand and implement things appropriately.
Right. Like I was talking before about the way that, web people and operating system people don't understand each other, right? And like if you look at it, there's a bunch of layers, right? There's
Yeah,
markup, and then there's a DOM, and then there's internal accessibility representation, and then there's mapping to, half a dozen accessibility API, operating system accessibility APIs. And then there's every AT on those operating systems, mostly consuming those APIs, but sometimes going back over here too. And so like the screen reader support one works all the way out here in user land, and something like Axe works all the way there in markup land. And WPT is sort of that internal representation, but there isn't data about a lot of those layers, except maybe in Aaron Leventhal's brain, right? Like um, and Aaron Leventhal has a wonderful big brain, but it's difficult for other people to access,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly. It's funny you could like saying that about Aaron. He says that like he's one of the people I've never quite like I've talked to him over the years, but I never quite felt comfortable in his presence. Always feel, but that's just me. That's
I mean,
how.
he and I work together pretty closely at
Yeah,
Google, and he just, when you have a question, you could just say, "Hey, how does this work?" And if he doesn't remember, he'll just go look in the code, right? And
yeah,
but not everybody can go look in the Chrome code and know where to
yeah,
look. And you know, I mean, not only is it an enormous code base, but it's also C++ and 25 years old, and
yeah, yeah.
um, it's not an easy thing to just go look.
No,
And so having some more, you know, test-driven ways of looking at that information,
yeah,
and particularly having it as automated as possible so that it can stay fresh without having to, pay armies of testers, which nobody wants to do anymore.
yeah.
That was one of the things that was nice at Starbucks was they still had QA. So I taught all the QA people how to do accessibility testing. It was great.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so we've been speaking for over an hour now, so it's probably time to um wind it up.
Yeah. Do you want me to answer one of your quiz questions?
Yeah, if you want. I'll just hold on a sec. I'll. I mean, this the Wake 3.
Oh boy. Okay.
How? What's your gut feeling about what the direction did? I mean, do
It
you have much
seems
interest in it?
it seems like They are starting to get their act together.
Well, that's good.
Um, I'm not super involved in WCAG 3. When they were when people were deciding whether to do 3.0 or do 2 dot a million, I was more in favor of 2 dot a million because of backward compatibility and the legal references. And, I was also working for a big company at the time. Um,
Yeah. Well, you do know, are you aware that there's now talk of a two dot? Um,
and I think that's probably needed because 3.0 is still a long way off.
yeah, yeah,
And, but the backward compatibility is super important. And I know a lot of people want to not have that. And the reasons aren't like there's nothing wrong with the reasons. It's just that in the same way that web and operating system people don't talk to each other, sometimes standards people and business people just really don't understand each other.
yeah,
And, the fact that WCAG 2 is the reference for every law around the world
yeah.
has been a huge driver of stuff actually getting done because
Yeah.
there's some clarity about what it is you're supposed to do.
That's one of the that's why I think that the ongoing work on the Waco 2 backlog, which is essentially, putting time into into updating and making and clarifying stuff in the voluminous techniques documents, whatever. I think this is really important work
Really
because
important.
it affects, like, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in Waco 3, I'm interested in the direction, but, you know, boots on the ground today, everybody uses Waco 2.
And even after WCAG 3 comes out, it's going to take the
Well,
conformance
yeah,
model is so different. It's going to
yes,
take a long time for regulation to catch up.
yeah. So yeah. I mean, I'm always wondering, will it be taken up before I retire or before I die? I don't know. Um,
I wouldn't be surprised if WCAG 3 ships before you retire, but I think it'll be at least another 5 years before regulations are able to integrate it because it's so different.
yeah,
Uh, and, a lot of governments around the world are in a state where they're not getting a whole lot done right now.
yeah.
And that wasn't true in 2008, right? Like there was a lot more momentum behind regulation, even in the US, than there is
Well,
now.
you don't think the EIA is sort of given things a jolt because it does. It seems from from my side where people are get in contact with us and ask us about work. Um, it seems to be the EIA is an important driver
It is,
in
yeah.
yeah the thing like there's always this people say, oh, that it shouldn't be about sort of the the stick. It should be more about the carrot. But yeah, just saying that, oh, well, it's a nice thing to do and it's the right thing to do, it just doesn't always cut it. I mean, companies don't give a shit really in the end about those things, or probably that is a bit harsh. They do care, they do have concern about, but it's it's the profit motive is much more to the fore. They're looking after their investments and their shareholders. So unless the government comes along and regulates it, it quite
I
often
mean,
not going to happen.
something I've seen happen a lot is that the existence of some regulation or a lawsuit gets the process started. And then they hire someone like you or me to go and teach the teams what it means and how to do it. And for the most part, most people who work on products, once they know it's a thing and know basically how to do it, they want to do a good job. They try to
Yeah,
do a good job.
yeah,
Most people do. Not everybody and not everybody's boss, but for the most part, if you have a team and you teach them how to do it, they're going to want to do it right.
yeah.
And that is everything. But and the people on that team who are actually writing the code and doing the testing and making the graphics high enough contrast and all of those things, like what got them started sometimes was that there was a stick.
Yeah.
Their boss got hit with a stick, and that
Yeah.
pushed it up the priority list. But however they start, whether it's carrot or stick, there's also a lot of stories about like some executive has a kid with a disability and
Yeah.
starts an initiative and yada yada. Both of those things can happen, but
It's in the end, it doesn't really matter how it
it doesn't
happens.
matter.
If it
Doesn't matter.
happens, it
Yeah.
happens. And so yeah. So I'm not anti-legislation. I think legislation, you know, big government is a good thing. That's my particular bit. But yeah, so Wake 3, and well, I attend the meetings and I follow along with it, but I haven't um put a lot of time into actually uh I'm still just like I'm always very cautious. I'm finding my feet with it with stuff. So I tend to, I do stuff that I work on stuff that I feel confident in working on it, and I just listen and try to understand the flow of discussion that continues for these sort of developments. I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity place to be. I think talking about the W3C and the working groups, uh, it's all like I feel like I've come home, but being more involved. And it's just there's new faces and old faces like Yanina Sajka. I mean, I remember being involved in the HTML task force 15 years ago, and there she's
Yeah.
it's sort of like it's just yeah, old faces and new faces, and it's still yeah, I'm thoroughly enjoying it. That's what I should say.
I really like working with W3. I always have. Like the people are so nice and everybody's really smart and like really
Yeah,
trying to get things done. And recently, just to echo your point, it's one of the few places where I encounter coworkers who are older than me. Um, and I'm a
yeah,
little bit younger than the baby boomers, not a ton, but I'm a little bit younger than the baby boomers. So for most of my career, there were like lots and lots of people who were 15 or 20 years older than me, and they're all retired now. And W3, I still run into people who are in that, and it feels much more comfortable than I'm just not used to being the old fart, right?
yeah. Yeah, well, but that's on that note. That is what I want to like. I don't want to become a dinosaur,
Yeah.
and so I always. But I think that all of us are lucky that who are involved in this work is that it is always like you're never doing the same thing. You're doing something
Yeah,
different and novel, and you're pushing the boundaries and pushing yourself to understand things which you don't get the opportunity in every job to do. So I think we're all
you really don't. Yeah.
we're
And
really quite lucky.
that's why I've continued doing W3C work even when I had to do it,
Yeah,
outside of 40 hours. Um, that it's just and it also has a big impact, right? I mean, you
yeah,
get an accessibility feature into the HTML spec like that,
yeah.
and you got a browser to implement it like that matters. That matters, right? That impacts everybody.
I'll
And
always have the main element as my
yes, and,
yeah,
and Maine is awesome, right?
yeah. But it was a really simple thing, but it was such a lot of work. It really, I,
Details and summary was mine.
yeah, well, that was nice. Yeah, I mean, there's some really nice features in HTML, but it's just getting them to work. The other thing, because I don't know at the time, but when Canvas was being developed
Yeah,
and implemented, specified, there was lots of pushback about using Canvas for interactive, you know, interaction and whatever, and the representation of controls, etc., and semantics. But I just recently picked up on something, and I always thought that at some point people are going to use Canvas to build UI, and I've but it never really happened in any big way. But just recently, there's some I can't remember the name of. I'll put it when I put together the posts associated with this. I'll put it on there. But essentially, some mobile framework that just uses Canvas to create UI all over the place.
Yeah, Google had one of those too.
Yeah,
Um, and I mean, we've come full circle, right? Because HTML was this super high level language.
yeah,
It's all declarative and all like you don't need to know about how any of the goo inside the computer works. And then 5 years later, people were using it to blip pixels to the screen and
yeah.
having to build all that goo again, right?
But there was the thing was is that the person at the time that was writing the specifications for such, or had a lot of influence, just decided that they didn't want um, people to be able to do UI in Canvas. But just like anything, I mean, they the when a div and a span were developed, they even want those to become user interface elements potentially. But if you add you add on the behaviors, etc., people will find a way to use things in the way that you don't want it used, or you don't, it's not specified to be used. And so you've got to come to terms with that and try to make it accessible regardless.
And again, that was the idea behind UIA, right? That you could
Yeah,
combine descriptions of behaviors and come up with new UI widgets and describe how they worked without having to come up with a name and change windows.
yeah.
Um, uh, and I really wish that ARIA had additive things. I've been saying this for years, right? Like the thing where if you put role equals link on a heading, it stops being a heading. Like
Yes.
being able to say that this thing is a heading button link would
Yeah.
be awesome. But there's ARIA doesn't work like that.
Is there a reason? Oh, yeah. We should do
People
this.
want a heading button. That's the
Yeah,
reason, right?
yeah. We should do this. We should have a further conversation. I'm already inviting people back. Everybody I talk to. So yeah, we can go into a deeper dive in our next meeting. What I was also going to say was that I will be in. I've been asked to present at government a Dutch government conference that's happening in Utrecht
Okay.
in March. So it may be worth something
Yeah.
you were checking out. Hidi, got the gig via Hidi because we're working on the WCAG EM together. He's going to do a talk on WCAG 3, and I'm going to do a talk on the WCAG EM. So I
Cool.
better read it.
I implemented that at Starbucks actually. We
Did
did
you?
we and built a whole automated system that used Google Analytics data to figure out what were the most important things and build
Oh, well, that's cool.
the
Yeah,
test set. Yeah, it was really
well,
cool.
yeah, you could provide, because that's one of the things we've been thinking about. I mean, what we essentially tried to do with Wayfair EM is just bring it into the modern day, and for how we all know that the likes of people such as James Craig will make it clear that WCAG is about the web accessibility, but we all know that WCAG is being used to test the accessibility of mobile applications and
And desktop applications and
yeah,
operating
desktop
systems. And yeah,
applications and document, like that's the part of the thing was that it's always been the web accessibility guidelines, but then it covers PDF. The PDF's not, or like yes, it's primarily, but it's still it's a document format that
it's easier to make like the parallels between PDF and a web page are a lot more than the parallels between Chrome OS and a web page, right? Like, and
yeah,
everything is being tested against WCAG because of WCAG ICT. But
yeah,
WCAG was written and designed with the assumption that the stuff you were working on was rendered inside a browser on an
yeah,
operating system,
yeah,
and that lots of things were abstracted away from you. And then trying to bring it back so it covers everything. And at some level, UI is UI, and a
Yeah,
lot of the things are applicable. But when you start digging into how stuff works and why it's broken, and then it gets really messy.
yeah, but that is sort of the implementation details or the remediation details rather than as you say, when I look at a app on my mobile phone, I see UI and I see that I can use the built-in screen reader in iOS to interact with it. It's still doing the same sort of stuff. It's telling me whether it's a button, whether it's pressable and blah blah blah. And there's not a lot of difference between that and the sort of information that's provided about the UI on that's created the web
And
page.
voiceover on iOS is very good about making that experience consistent. But
Yeah,
if you go to, say, Windows, and you look at the difference between a native app and a web app that look exactly the same.
yeah,
The screen reader experience is radically different, and that's confusing.
yeah,
Uh, there have gotten to be, with Aria and various other things that happened after Aria, you can make them a little more consistent, but there's still this sort of underlying thing that web pages are scrollable documents full of text and links and maybe images, and the way that AT works with them has a lot of that built into it.
yeah,
And that's not true for, I don't know, a video player or
yeah,
this, Zoom app I'm looking at, right?
yeah.
Which is probably Electron, but
Yeah, well, yeah, it could well, but it could be large. It's just like the Firefox browser. I mean, the UI of that is built with HTML, as far as I know.
I believe that that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, it just looks like,
And
standard.
some of Chrome's is too.
Yeah. So there's that blurring, and with the Electron apps, it's essentially JavaScript and
Right.
HTML and stuff. So anyway, we could rabbit on for hours and hours about this
Yeah,
stuff.
we could.
But yeah, we could. I need to go and have my dinner,
Yep,
and
me too.
you probably need to eat as well. And thank you for taking the time to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really fun to chat. And if I could just put a little plug in there, right? Like
Of course, yeah,
I'm looking
please,
for consulting contracts. I'm
yeah,
looking for funding for SVG AAM, and I'm looking for funding for ACD. And I really, I would like to be able to do a balance of commercial contracts and standards work and have, both of those in my life.
a
Um,
very a noble cause, a very noble desire. Um, what I will say is that as is clear, we've known each other for years, and we've been around the same,
yeah,
um, sort of standard space, community, accessibility. I would wholeheartedly suggest any corporation or any organization um, would be very lucky to have you and your expertise.
thank you. That's really nice. Thank you.
Well, I mean, I just tell it like it is, Cynthia.
That's even better.
Yeah. So good luck, and
Thank you.
I will talk to you again soon, and hopefully see you sooner
Yeah,
rather than later.
yeah. I'm sure I
Thank
will
you,
see you soon.
thank you for being on Fireside Chat: The Resurrection.
Thank you for having me. Good
Okay.
night.
Bye.
Bye.